Okay, now is it on? Okay. I'm going to start from up here. I don't know if I'll be able to do it from here or not, especially if the presentation doesn't go. There we go. So I'm looking forward to giving both an update on the recent trip I had to Kenya, but also as I was thinking about this evening, I think it's been at least 4 and maybe 5 years since we've had a full Kenya update. And when I think about the number of people that have turned over in our congregation, all the new people here, so what I'm going to do tonight is divide this in 2 parts. I am going to talk about the most recent trip and things going on with KSOP, but also wanted to take an opportunity to give some of the backstory for those who are new to our congregation who've been in the last few years, and also maybe as a reminder of those of our own congregation who've been here a long time, who maybe has lost track of all the things that led up, the providence of God that we can see in the work that has happened in Kenya. So first of all, let's think about the timeline of our involvement, and I think you really will see the providence of God. So this is the timeline as Teresa and I could remember. I think I have it right. So if I have anything wrong, some of those who have been involved can correct me. And I can't see it from there. So some of you may remember Franco Wakisi. He attended Winthrop University play soccer on a soccer scholarship. He is from Kenya, from Malaha, Kenya. And he was baptized while attending Winthrop in the late 2008, 2009 time frame. I may have the year off, but in that general timeline, Franco was baptized. And immediately he had an interest in going back to Kenya to teach his family what he had learned while he was over here. So Mark Reynolds was our minister at the time, and Mark had got an email from a Christian named Wycliffe Afuma in Butere, Kenya. And Wycliffe sent an email to Mark. He had gotten Mark's email address through a publication, kind of I was going to say random, but a providential. You can see how things come together. So Wycliffe, out of the blue, sends Mark an email saying, "No missionaries ever come to our area. Please, can you come over and help teach us?" Kind of the Macedonian call in an email instead of a dream. And so Mark talks to Franco and says, "Franco, do you know where Butere is?" And Franco said, "Yeah, that's probably about 20 miles from my hometown." So the things started to take shape there to say, all right, let's get a trip to that part of Kenya. So in 2010, Franco, Mark Reynolds, Dal Hicks, and Paul Edinger traveled to Kenya as a first opportunity to get over there, meet Wycliffe, talk with Franco's family. In 2011, the next year, Mark and Mindy and Teresa and I traveled to Kenya, so the second trip of our congregation. And actually during that trip, Franco's mother and father were baptized. And I have a picture of Franco's dad here in a moment. So after 2 or 3 trips, very good discussions, very good engagement with the Christians there. We were conducting seminars to teach. We would have multiple day seminars. And we started seeing, all right, this is great. It's great that we can teach when we're over here, but this is not good enough. We really need a school of preaching over here so there can be more engagement and a better job of doing that. But we didn't know how to do that. So we were wondering, it'd be great to have a school of preaching over here. So we started inquiring at different places. And then, again, you can see the providence coming into place. Bear Valley Institute of Biblical Studies is based in Denver, just outside Denver, Colorado. It so happens to be there's a school, Andrew Connolly School of Preaching in Tanzania, that a lot of Kenyans were going across the border to. So Kenyans would go to Tanzania to go to a preaching school, and all of a sudden it became harder. There were some changes in some of the requirements, and it was harder for Kenyans to travel to Tanzania to go to school. So a number of the Kenyans started asking Bear Valley, hey, we need a school of preaching. Can you establish a school here in Kenya? Looking, all right, how do we get a school? They have a number of schools around the world. So they started getting interest in a school, and we started having interest in a school. And then through some mutual connections, we said, wait a minute, this seems like a match made in heaven, literally, I believe. So we worked with Bear Valley, and in 2012, KSOP was started, Kenya School of Preaching. If you hear me use the term KSOP, was established in cooperation. We are the sponsoring congregation. Bear Valley oversees all the curriculum and all the administrative things that we really don't have experience doing. So it was a great match. So then for the next 10 years, really on an almost annual basis, I think all but 2 years, COVID year last year and only one other year, I think that nobody from our congregation went. So in addition to the earlier ones that went, David and Deborah Thompson went on a number of trips, Frank Calloway, Jordan Calloway, Ken Williams, Alan, Amy, and Asa Jobson went. Chad Garrett has been on several trips to this part of Kenya as well. So then in 2014, the first graduating class of KSOP occurred. You'll see the Alpha Beta, the name of the classes on the Greek alphabet. So 2016, 19 students graduated in the second class. 2018, 16 graduated. And the Delta class that we just went over for was the fourth graduating class of Kenya School of Preaching. So just to Kisumu here, that you can't read those words, it's blurred, but that's Buteri. So just to get a sense, that's where the Wycliffe and a number of preachers he works with is from. So give you an idea of just this western part of Kenya. And one thing I want to point out as an overlay, that's an overlay of the population density of Kenya. So Kenya really has three population centers: Nairobi, that area, western Kenya, which is where we've been working, and then Mombasa on the coast where there's a port and some tourist activities. So you can see that through the area that we're working around, we touch one of the largest population centers of Kenya. So this is a picture on the first trip. So we started, as we said, doing seminars. This is a seminar at a building we were able to rent, and we probably have 75 to 100 people there. Very good seminars. You can see kind of the audience. This was the 2011 trip. The ladies, having separate ladies classes and men's classes, and the ladies really appreciate it. They had not gotten that much attention before from biblical teaching. So being able to do the women going over, Mindy and Teresa and Deborah, and I'm sure the same thing happened with Amy. The ability of having missionary women come into whole classes for the women there has been very, very productive in many ways. Well, we kind of outgrew that. So we had to find a bigger building. This was a building at a school, so we started having 200 or up to 250 people in these seminars. So we had to go to bigger facilities and hold more seminars. So this is what we were doing on an annual basis. And again, a lot of good was happening there. And so there were already a number of congregations in this area, but more and more congregations became planted. Just to give you an idea of this is a typical congregation. You can't see it very well with the shadow, but that's a mud. So they're wooden sticks, tree limbs and things like that. A wooden frame that mud is put over and a sheetrock. A tin roof. That's a typical church building that you see there. Kanisa lo Cristo. That's in Swahili, which is actually very similar to Spanish and some other languages. We see the Church of Christ written. Buchifi is another area. In this area, there's probably every there is a village. And if you think about it, they walk, in this part of Kenya, it's for a private person to own a car. That is extremely rare. It's very rare for a private person to own a motorcycle. A few people own bicycles, but the vast majority of people walk everywhere. So when we think about 30 minutes to a congregation, 20 to 30 minutes driving to a congregation, all right, that means we pull from an area generally, 10, 15, 20 miles. Everybody in here is probably that far away. But over there, since people are walking, they're pulling from an area of 3 to 5 kilometers in their system. So it's how far can people walk in 30 minutes? How far can people walk in 20 to 30 minutes? So you have a lot of small congregations very close to each other in our thought process. And that's something we've had to get used to. Sometimes they've been a little bit closer than we then it seemed appropriate, and it got into them starting, depending on who started. We've dealt with some issues like that. The congregations are much closer than we think of because few people have private transportation. This is a kind of Soweto congregation. That sign, I don't know about you, but I see that sign and it just makes your heart happy. It just makes your heart feel good. Wycliffe is not in any of these pictures because he's always the one taking with the camera. This is James Mokiba. I'll show him a little bit later. He was in the first graduating group of KSOP, but he's also in the Buteri area, and he's one of our primary folks we work with. He did all the translation, or interpreting, for me on this most recent trip, but a very strong Christian and a great asset to the church there. Jordan may remember this. Sometimes you're meeting under trees. This is in a congregation that was in the Rift Valley area, and that's from the trip, I guess, maybe 3 years ago when Jordan was with us preaching. But that's typical of the church building. Sometimes you're meeting in the open. In this case, they did have a church building, but we had a bigger crowd than usual with us being there. Sometimes that draws a bigger crowd than they would have otherwise. So we met outside. I put this picture in. This is just one of my favorite pictures of I can't remember which trip this was on, one of the earlier ones, but just the amount of color, and it has nothing to do with him wearing the Florida Gators shirt. You do see, T-shirts, of all sorts. You see when you're over there, but just the colors and the kids and the smiles. But also, this man is named Peter, one of the preachers, and there's a group of preachers in the Buteri area, probably a dozen to 15 of them, that collaborate in trying to get preachers to a lot of congregations that don't have regular preachers. So they collaborate and said, all right, you're going to go to this one this time, or I'll go to that one, and do things like that. Peter's 70 years old. The congregation he was bicycling 5 hours each way to go preach at 70 years old, and doing it with a smile on his face. You can see. So part of what we do as a congregation, I'm going to talk most about the Kenya School of Preaching, but we do provide some financial support to help with transportation for these kind of things. So we do send some money to help those preachers with transportation, evangelism type travel expenses is one of the things we do there. So obviously the ultimate goal is people becoming Christians, being baptized. This is actually Franco's dad. You may not be able to see, but that's February of 2011 when Franco's dad was baptized. A little bit different than what we think of today with a baptistry, but I've never been to the Jordan River, but I've seen pictures of the Jordan River where it's not that wide. And I don't know, but you get a sense of what it would have been like in biblical times. And that's a common theme from any of those who have gone to Kenya. There's so much that the Bible comes alive in a different way because you see some of the things that are dealt with in, especially like 1 Corinthians, of new Christians and some of the misunderstandings they have and some of the questions they have. We get asked questions that almost word for word that Paul was dealing with the Corinthians, questions that they were obviously asking. But this mindset that you see, and sometimes seeing the simple time of outdoor baptism. And I know a number of people here. I know David was baptized in a pool of water, a creek like that. But this is kind of a common. How many people would be hesitant to get baptized if you knew you were going to get baptized in a place like that where you had to sit down and then lay back? It shows the dedication. Maybe causes you to think about your faith a little bit. Wait a minute, what am I doing here? Would I've been hesitant? But they definitely are not hesitant. This is also one of my favorite pictures. I don't know if you see this here, you can see there's a very small stream here, very small creek. And what they've done is made an earthen dam to create a baptismal pool. And what this congregation does, each Sunday, a couple people come early and build the dam in case they have any baptisms. And it's kind of a common occurrence that they have baptisms, so they do that every Sunday to make their baptismal pool. Well, downstream, people need the water. Cattle are drinking it and things like that. So at the end of every, when they're done with the service, when they're done with baptisms, they tear the dam down so that the water can flow free. The next Sunday, they build it up again. So that just shows you the dedication and just some things we don't even think about. That's just a different culture, different way of life. Not right or wrong or better or worse, just different. And in their minds, this is very common. But I think to me it shows that dedication and the commitment. If you think about it in this situation, how easy would it be to say, well, immersion, what does it matter? Let's just sprinkle some water, or let's do something else. But they understand the significance of baptism and immersion, and are going through this type of effort, which is really humbling as we think about it. However, there are opportunities where it's not quite like that. So this was one of our trips where they knew somebody that worked at a motel that had a swimming pool. So we went to the hotel swimming pool and baptized people. And basically they just got, I don't know what would happen in the United States today if you went to a hotel swimming pool and had everybody get out of the pool so you could have a baptism. And there it wasn't a big deal. Everybody got out of the pool, and I think at that time, at least a dozen or so, maybe a little bit more, were baptized there. All right, a little bit more about the Kenya School of Preaching. So, started in 2012. That actually, I guess, should say 2012 through 2018. This was the first location of Kenya School of Preaching. These are the buildings that were being used for it. This was apartments that had nothing to do with the school. So, one of them was operating a beauty shop there. It wasn't the best scenario. It was a residential area. They got complaints from the students singing, and officials threatened to close it down because they were operating a school. They said in an area that wasn't supposed to have a school, and there were a lot of issues with the first location, but it got KSOP off the ground. So it was realized that along the way we did need a more permanent location for KSOP. So a lot of time and energy and prayers and effort went into that. So this was the first class of Kenya School of Preaching. This is James Makiba that I mentioned earlier. You can see David and Deborah there. This is Mike Reese, who is the coordinator for Bear Valley. He's the one that makes sure the curriculum is done right, that makes sure it's certified from a Bear Valley standpoint. He also goes over and teaches 2 or 3 of the short courses. One of the very great things about Kenya School of Preaching, the vast majority of the teaching is done by Kenyans. Most of them are Kenyans who went to the Andrew Connolly School of Preaching, but now actually there's several of the graduates in this class who actually do teaching now in the Kenya School of Preaching. So the school is run by Kenyans. Charles and Elias are the director and dean. It's run by Kenyans. The majority of the teaching is done by Kenyans. A number of Americans come over and do short courses. So it's a 2-year program with 2 months on, 1 month off, then 2 months on, 1 month off. And at the end of the 2 months, there's 2 weeks where there's short courses. And it's on occasion, Americans come over and teach the short courses, but all the other teaching is done by Kenyans. With the mindset, and this last year kind of proved that out, we never know when we're not going to be able to go over there anymore. So we do not want a school of preaching that is dependent on Americans being there. Long term, hopefully long term, none of our money is even needed. But we want to make sure it's positioned that they can continue on, and they did for the year of COVID. They were shut down for 6 months, but then about 6 months more of no Americans traveling over there. And all the teaching was done by Kenyans. So that's been a goal, and the last year it's really kind of borne out the need for that. This was the initial classroom of that first class, and then we have that class graduating in 2014. So do a formal graduation. It really means a lot. And Bear Valley this is a 2-year degree for them. And Bear Valley, at first they were hesitant, and at first they were thinking about this kind of just being a certificate program. But Denny Petrillo, who's the head of the Bear Valley program, he actually traveled over there and actually taught some of the classes. And when he realized the curriculum and the intensity of the teaching there, Bear Valley did this as a full 2-year degree program. So it's very strenuous. I think in every class, at least one and usually more than one drop out because it's just too tough. And while we would like everyone to make it, it's not necessarily a bad thing because it shows, and I think after that, every class gets more and more diligent or improved because the word kind of gets out that this is not a place you're going just to have fun. This is something where it's very strict discipline and a lot of studying is needed to make it through. This is the second class, the beta class of the school. Wanted to show this picture. This is at the graduation of the second class. You can see Dal there and Deborah and Teresa. But also wanted to point out Brandon Kearns, that's his wife and his mom. But Brandon Kearns has a charitable organization called Christians for Kenya. And he actually, they do a lot of work getting communion supplies to the Christians in Kenya. But also they've been very supportive of the physical facilities that have been there. So Brandon Kearns and his organization have been very supportive and one of the reasons also for the success of what we've done there. So that beta class graduated in 2016. Then we finally got around. We said, all right, things came together. We kind of proven that KSOP is going to work. So let's find a long-term location. Excuse me. So this is Kisumu. There's the airport. So found some land outside of Kenya by the main highway. And just from Google Earth now, you can see what the Kenya School of Preaching facilities look like. You have a classroom and classroom and some administration there. About half of this is the primary classroom. These are the dorms can hold up to 20 students plus some of the teachers. This is where a kitchen and the dining areas are, and this is just an outdoor what's the word I'm thinking of? Pavilion. That's it. That's an outdoor pavilion, which you'll see in further pictures. Also in this picture, this is a Church of Christ, a congregation where a building was built close to it. It's not associated, it's not part of KSOP, but it's a congregation close by. Obviously, a lot of the students attend when they're not out teaching on their own. So here is what the KSOP facilities now look like. That's the dorms, that's the classroom and some offices. That's the kitchen and dining area. And then you can see the pavilion as you're just looking into the facility. 2018, the Gamma class graduated, the third class to graduate from KSOP. So now let's get around to the 21 trip, the trip we just had. I told Teresa yesterday when I was laying these out, I said, I got to find a transition slide to really talk about this trip. So I figured that no more appropriate transition slide was a COVID vaccination report. Because obviously that impacted our ability to go last year. It made it where we just had a very small, I was the only one from here. I met up with a couple people, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But COVID really made it. Had to get tested several days before leaving here. Had to get tested in Atlanta while in transit so I could keep going on the trip. While in Kenya, we had to get tested 3 days before we could come back. And so that was the one. If this had said negative, if this had said positive, I may not be back yet. Who knows? I would have had to stay there. And then we had another test at the airport. So it took 4 tests, COVID tests, for us to be able to make the trip happen. I wanted to point this out as well, something that we can't, I don't think, fully appreciate. Kenya is made up of approximately 40 tribes. This calls them ethnic groups, but the tribes is the terminology that's used there. These are I think the 10 largest. Kikuyu is the majority one at 22%. Then you see all these down to Maasai. Then you have all these others that aren't very large. But you have approximately 40 tribes and approximately 68 languages that are spoken in Kenya. And so a number of the tribes have subdialects, have dialects within the tribe. So this makes the distribution of Bibles that much tougher and that much more important. English and Swahili are the official languages of Kenya. And people under 25, 30 typically speak Swahili and English. Their secondary schools are taught in English. So the younger speak English well, and especially Swahili. But the older ones, the older Christians, I guess people my age over there, a lot of them only speak their tribal language, and in some cases only their sub-dialect of their tribal languages. So when we get into the Bible distribution, there's a list over there on the right. Something happened, well, I'll make it up. So I'm not going to make it up, I'll recall it accurately. So on the right-hand side, there's actually a table there. I somehow must have changed, the writing was probably in black, and I changed the background, so it's black writing on black background, which doesn't work. But we ended up distributing 964 Bibles this trip. And about half of them went to the preachers in the Buteri area that you see in this picture, those Bibles being distributed. About the other half of the Bibles went to the KSOP students as they graduated so that they could carry the Bibles back to their home congregations. I think it was 9 different languages. There you go. Thanks, Jack. So you can see the different translations that Bibles were bought in, of the 964 we bought. This is an example. Luo in this area, Luo is one of the dominant tribes. And Lubukusu is a dialect of Luo, which has its own translation. And you would think it would be pretty close, but it's not. Evidently, you can't read. If you have one, it is not just a minor translation to the other. So they are very appreciative of this. And as I was looking back in my files, I think the first time we bought Bibles over there, we bought about 200 of them, which was great. But then, it just shows how this has built. Almost 1,000 Bibles this time, which we were able to buy over there. There is a Kenya Bible Society, which is an independent Bible translation society. So we're able to buy the Bibles over there. Much easier than trying to carry Bibles with us. So also on this trip, this is an orphanage that one of the KSOP students started. Over the last year, between COVID and they had some really devastating floods earlier last year. And Moses, one of the KSOP student who lives here and has the orphanage here now, I think he had taken in a few, children, then all of a sudden 39 showed up with the floods and the COVID, and next thing you know, he's needing 39. He's got an orphanage with 39 children in it. There's a congregation in West Virginia that's done a lot of the early support, and they're trying to figure out how to get this orphanage on a more sustainable basis from an economic standpoint. This is common for those who have been, a smile will come to your face. They are very hospitable. Anytime you go and teach, generally before you teach and after you teach, you'll go into the home of whoever's closest by. And Mandazi that's Krispy Kreme donuts, and those are peanuts, ground nuts. So those are 2 of my favorites. So I had to put that in there. Also, while I was there, one of the days I had a seminar for the preachers and elders. Since I was the only one there and it was a relatively short trip on the ground just for 1 week and needed to do some other things, I had a one-day seminar where preachers and elders from congregations in this area came together. So this was, we had, I guess, about 3 or 4 hours total in seminar that we were with them. This is the Buteri church building there in Buteri. So we had a really good session with the preachers and the elders there. In addition to KSOP, James, that I mentioned earlier, established another school, a part-time school called Beltrop that's there in Buteri. There are now at least 3 part-time schools that are also in Kenya that came about as a part of all this work being done. So one of the benefits of Beltrop, for a number of reasons, there are some men who can't go to KSOP, either because KSOP is in English, so maybe their English is not good enough for them to be a student there, or maybe just academically that's not going to work for them to go to KSOP, or maybe they can't spend that much time away from their families. So there's at least 3 different schools going on where 1 week a month they'll come together, and generally KSOP graduates are the ones who are teaching in these schools. So also visited several congregations and just spend time preaching and teaching and general encouragement. These are actually 3 congregations that we'd never been to before. So in this area, if you drew a circle, probably 50-mile radius from Kisumu, there are probably 200-300 congregations. So there's a lot that we've never been to. And again, from there, it was interesting. Wycliffe said nobody comes to our area, no missionaries come to our area. 20, 30 miles away, there's people who come all the time. But 20 or 30 miles, when you don't have cars and you don't have that type of transportation, generally is like 200 or 300 miles for us. Here's another congregation that, again, this is typical construction with the mud and the tin roof. Just a number. Well, not many kids in this one because school was in session while I was there, so not many kids were in these pictures, but generally a lot of kids are in these as well. All right, I mentioned the COVID testing. This is the hospital where I got COVID testing. So this is Mike Reese, again, who's the Bear Valley coordinator. This is Mike Jones from a congregation in West Virginia. He was visiting some other congregations, so the 3 of us were together. We met in transit and then spent most of the time together. We split ways a couple of times. Mike was teaching a short course, the last short course of the session. But this was getting our COVID test to make sure everything went okay. So then the day of graduation. So this was the 13th, March, does that sound right? Yeah, I think it was March 13th, so right at a month ago. So this is held under the pavilion. Last graduation, over 500 people showed up. And according to the Kenya rules, with COVID rules, you couldn't have more than 150 people. So this time they created cards and each student had a certain number of invitations. There was still a concern that a bunch of people would show up outside the fence, but it ended up being okay. We probably were over the 150, but it was managed. But last time it was, again, 500 or 600. 51 different congregations were represented just at the graduation. So that's congregations who either had a student there or were previous students. So it's just a sampling of the congregations in the area. That's Charles Agutu giving the part of his comments. You can see the graduates there. A little in the corner here is the American flag and the Kenyan flag, just showing the collaboration for us here. So this is the graduating class of the Delta class, that graduated. They should have graduated in 2020, but because of COVID, again, the school was closed for 6 months or a little bit more, so things were delayed to this year. But just this class, while students at KSOP, 461 baptisms, 159 restorations, 21 church plants, 10 congregation restorations, and the orphanage that I mentioned earlier. This is just from these men while the time they were KSOP students. I don't have the numbers from the previous 3 classes, but the numbers I'm sure are something similar to that. Obviously, we can't take credit. We're just a small part of what God is doing in Kenya. But those within KSOP and the preachers around Buteri that we're associated with, literally thousands of people have been baptized during the last decade. Probably, who knows, maybe 10,000. But it is an area that is very receptive to the gospel. You have men who are dedicated and willing to teach. And because of the activities, because of the support of this congregation, men are being trained. Kenyans being trained by Kenyans so that they can teach Kenyans. And as we tell them, one of the reasons we're teaching them because we may need them to come to America in a few years and be missionaries. So a thankfulness to the congregation, to the Charlotte Avenue congregation. You can all be pleased. It's been over 10 years that we've been in Kenya. The support financially, emotionally, spiritually has been great from this congregation. So as elders and as all the people who have been to Kenya, that is very much appreciated. One of the things we've learned is you can't do this without having boots on the ground. You can't do this remotely. It takes involvement. And so we do want to especially thank you for 10 years of support. I also wanted to, part of the uplifting, but also almost a humbling part of this. It really makes you understand that the gospel message is the same. You know, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in America, regardless of our race or tribe. You know, there's more conflicts in tribes in Kenya than there is in the races in America. So among those differences, and one of the things of KSOP, you know, you get 5 or 6 different tribes represented in the students, which really helps get the message out as well and helps build that brotherhood. But that gospel message is the same. You know, what we have in Matthew 28 and Mark 16, go and teach and baptize. That's how people become Christians. Acts chapter 2, you know, the day of Pentecost, men and brethren, what shall we do? Repent and be baptized for the remission of your sins. And we see they were added to the church there in Acts chapter 2. And whether it's in Kenya or whether it's in America, that is it's the same gospel message. It's the same thing we can teach, and as the people are baptized there, they're in the same church, the same church of Christ that we're a part of. That's one of the really heartening messages when we're there, and they constantly tell us, you know, tell everyone here hello and so thankful for everything. But there's that brotherhood because we are part of the same body, because we joined it the same way. We follow the teachings of Jesus. When we become a Christian the same way and we follow the teachings of Jesus the same way, we are of the same body. And that's what the whole effort in Kenya is about. But there may be, you know, that again, I said that's the same message that goes here. There may be people here tonight who are not Christians, who have not been baptized for the remission of your sins, who have not been added to the kingdom. You know, we have a baptism here that's maybe a little bit better, at least cleaner than the water there, but the water doesn't matter. The same message is there. The same gospel is for all. And so if you're here tonight and you have not responded to that gospel, we encourage you to do so as we stand and sing.